Welcome again, everybody, to the Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics here in Waterloo for the third and final program here at this summit. Our two previous programs looked at access to energy here in Canada and globally. Tonight, we are interested in how to transform existing energy systems to get greener power everywhere. And joining us now for that conversation, we welcome Tom Rand. He is managing partner at Arcturn Ventures and the author of Kick, the Fossil Fuel Habit. Jatin Nathwani, Professor and Ontario Research Chair in Public Policy and Sustainable Energy at the University of Waterloo. Sarah Birch, Professor of Geography and Environmental Management, also at the University of Waterloo, and a Canada Research Chair in Sustainability, Governance and Innovation. And Ortwin Wren, Scientific Director at the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies in Potsdam, Germany. Ladies and gentlemen, how about a Waterloo welcome for our four guests today? Very nice. As we have for our two previous programs, we're going to just put a couple of charts up to get our audience up to scratch on what we're going to be talking about tonight. So let's start with this. Nearly 80% of the world's energy consumption, as we mentioned, comes from fossil fuels. That according to the Renewable Energy Network's Global Status Report. And let's see how that breaks down from country to country. For example, Kuwait, number one, 100% fossil fuels their economy goes for. Number two, the United States, about 3/4. China, about 2/3. Finland, just over half. Canada, we're actually well down the list at only about 1/4. France, 20%. Norway, only 4% of their energy consumption from fossil fuels. And Paraguay, because they've got so much hydroelectric generation, just 0.1%. Now that's a snapshot of where we are now. Here's what Bill Gates had to say in his open letter which he wrote this past February. He said, "We need an energy miracle." When I say miracle, I don't mean something that's impossible. I've seen miracles happen before: the personal computer, the internet, the polio vaccine. None of them happened by chance. They are the result of research and development and the human capacity to innovate. Okay, let's start there. Tom, do we need an energy miracle?
Well, I would say we certainly need innovation. I would distinguish innovation from a miracle. I think the challenge about talking about miracles is it takes your eye off the heavy lifting that we can do now. And it also, I would question what we mean by miracle. If we had this conversation 6 or 7 years ago, a miracle might be defined as the price of solar dropping by 80%, or an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley selling $20 billion worth of electric cars in a weekend. Those are miracles.
And that's happened.
That just happened about a month ago, Elon Musk, right? So I think the notion of miracle is, we're in danger of thinking about a single magic bullet solving a very complex problem that will take hundreds of little bits of innovation that are occurring every day. And that's probably how I prefer to think about it.
Sarah, what do you think? Do we need a miracle?
I would agree with Tom that the framing of a miracle makes it sound like something that's wildly unlikely, but it also drives our imaginations right to a technological fix. And I question that right from the beginning. I think we have so much incredible technical innovation right at our fingertips already, and what we need is innovation in a social and political and economic sense. So we're seeing that from around the world, that really what we need are social movements, are policies that accelerate the uptake of these great technologies that we already have.
Jatin.
The idea of a miracle is somewhat problematic, partly because it undermines, in a certain sense, the capability to achieve and make really substantial achievements in terms of the progress we need to make to get on a pathway that, let's say, to get to decarbonization. Miracles gets you to a stage which says, I'm not going to wait for something miraculous to happen, and therefore we continue on the path we're on. And that's why it's problematic, I think.
Ortwin.
Well, I think that it's human action that change things. And transformation are not done by miracles. They're done by people coming together and trying to change things. And I would really like also to emphasize what you just said. It's a combination of technology, of organization, good governance, and behavioral change. We need to have all these four things together, then we can actually be very successful in such transformations.
Let me follow up with you, Ortwin, and I'm going to quote Bill Gates again, who said, quote, "We need a game-changing energy breakthrough that will save our planet and power our world." If we don't find that, are we doomed?
Well, the question of doomed, I think, is always something which I think frightens people, and I'm not happy with this kind of catastrophic language. I think we're much worse off in the future, and of course a lot of us will really suffer if we have not the ability to make these changes. But I think what I like about the quote is it's really we need a change in mindset. We really have to change our mind, because we always think, well, the electricity comes from the socket, we get oil for our heating system, that we think about what kind of energy service do we really need, and is there a cleaner way to do that? And if you think we have that kind of new mind change in our mind, in our collective conscience, I think that will really make a difference.
Sarah.
I would also suggest, I think that it's unfortunate to think about this challenge as in need of one silver bullet, one technology, one innovation. And we know, of course, that it's many innovations woven together. It's a smarter system with more distributed power generation, for instance, as well as behavior change and political shifts that would deliver this sustainable energy future. And I agree that I think framing this in terms of doom and catastrophe just isn't motivating. It doesn't help us rally and come up with these creative solutions. It disempowers us and makes us feel paralyzed and apathetic, and that's, I think, not where we want to go.
Jatine, is that right? It's going to inspire us to do absolutely nothing if we just be doomsayers on this?
I actually wanted to build on Sarah's point, because the energy system, as we all understand and recognize, is a very complex system. It's an interconnected system, many devices, many approaches, and so on. And the challenge in front of us around the climate change question is in fact very, very significant, that we do need to transition to something that's a low-carbon energy economy in a hurry. And to that point then, what I'd like to say is that components, parts of this energy system could benefit from, let's call it miraculous, or at least step changes and improvements in these technologies that could unlock the potential and get us to move faster, meaning energy density for storage solutions, if it were to improve by a factor of 10, or for that matter, solar panel efficiencies, or one could go down a number of such solutions. So these component parts and step change, powerful improvements, both in efficiency and performance, would get us to where we want to get to. But let's not wait for that one miracle.
Tom.
I certainly wouldn't want to deny the importance of big breakthroughs, right? I mean, that's what we do at Arcturn, is we're looking for those big breakthroughs. So I certainly would agree with Bill Gates with that kind of notion, but instead of focusing on the end result, right, I think it's better to focus on the process that would produce that end result. Think of the equivalent in hockey, right? A Sidney Crosby or a Wayne Gretzky are prodigies. They're the equivalent of the energy miracle in hockey. They didn't come from nowhere, right? I mean, there's house leagues and coaches and scouts and a whole supporting infrastructure that enabled those two stars to emerge. In the same way, we can set up economic signals, we can set up innovation hubs. There's an ecosystem in which we can encourage all kinds of innovation and high-tech breakthroughs, and the system will push those innovations through, and if we work on human behavior and we work on the demand side, we'll create demand for those innovations. But that's a process, that's an ecosystem, rather than our mind immediately goes to, when we think of a magic bullet or a miracle, we think of our favorite technology. So someone thinks of nuclear, someone else thinks of enhanced geothermal, and so on. That's not the point. There's a system of innovation that will produce innovations in the right direction if we set that innovation system up.
Let me do one follow-up with you. Hockey's a good analogy. The frog in the boiling water is a good analogy too.
Sure.
You want to follow up on that one?
Sure. Well, I think one of the problems we have is the problem space is happening so slowly, right? That this is an atmospheric warming that happens over a lifetime. I think there are reasons why we're paralyzed into place. Like a frog in a pot of water won't jump out because it happens too slowly. Part of it's cognitive, part of it is that it's very difficult to think about climate change in that way, but part of it is our financial and economic systems, right? I talk to Bay Street a lot, and I try to convince investment bankers and pension fund managers to think about funding other kinds of infrastructure, right? To get out of the oil and gas game and get into cellulosic ethanol or energy storage or what have you. The challenge there is you have a deep psychological momentum to do what you did yesterday because you made a lot of money. And it is a professional risk. It is a personal risk for an investment professional to stick their neck out ahead of their peers. Not a lot to gain, there's a lot to lose. So when we think about the frog in a pot of water, there's reasons based on physiology why that frog is stuck there. we have rules of engagement in our systems that lock us into place. It can be psychological, it can be financial, and if we can unlock innovation in that system, then we can solve this problem.
Sarah.
I would say that one of the strategies that we have at our disposal that we've experimented with and had a lot of success with, to wake the frog in your language, is creating these visions of the future, something that is compelling, that is inspiring, that is radically different from what we have today, not just on an energy front, because of course we don't simply care about where our energy comes from. We want vibrant communities, healthy ones, biodiversity, we want clean water. There are all kinds of things that come together in a vision of a sustainable community. So we have tools to visualize sustainable futures, to get people around the table and expressing their values, their desires, and also what's feasible in communities to give us all a shake and allow us to kind of think outside the status quo or business as usual and come up with a more transformative vision.
Ortwin, you wanted to follow.
Well, first I would like to say something in defense of the frog. The frog does jump out. This is a story that people tell us, but the biologists tell us that's not true. So the frog is much smarter than maybe we are. And to that extent, I think the episode, of course, is very telling, but it said the frog is a little bit cleverer.
So who's the frog in the story here?
The frog, I mean, the story is that the frog would not jump out if you slowly warm up the water.
No, I get it.
Yeah.
But are we the frog in this
well, in the
energy
sense that,
story?
the issue is we're talking about kind of risks that, in classic terms, they're nonlinear and they're stochastic. Well, that's big words. But what it means is that things happen very slowly, and when they happen, we don't have the time to readjust. And that is the real problem, because we learn by trial and error. Anybody go to school, we go out there and then we have whatever homework, or we have some kind of test, and then we get the test back and then we know, okay, we have to learn more. Now, with a lot of nonlinear risks, the problem is for a long time nothing happens. We go out in Waterloo, now it's cold. We say, where is global warming? It's not here. So in a sense, we don't get the reinforcement that something bad is happening. But if some thresholds are being trespassed, then it's too late, and then adaptation will be extremely expensive. So we have to get this into the mood of saying we have to anticipate all these consequences, not with catastrophic language, but saying, well, this is going to happen because it is nonlinear, and we have the skills now to understand this, but it needs change.
All right, you talk change, everybody talks change, and yet I'm going back to Bill Gates again, and another one of his quotes. He says, Sheldon, let's bring this up if you would. If we just have today's technologies, will the world run the scary climate change experiment of heating up the atmosphere and seeing what happens? You bet we will. Bill Gates is looking for, I know you're all saying you can't wait for the magic bullet, but Jatine, if they figure out how to store energy to run everything you need in your home in something the size of your microwave that you can hang on the wall, that's a game changer, isn't it?
There is transformative change that is really required. I call step changes, if you wish. Here is an observation to make. We've been alerted to this problem of climate change for almost two and a half decades now, since 1991. What was the share of fossil fuels in the global energy system in 1990? It was 80-20, just as you pointed out.
What are you going to say? Was it 95%?
No, it was 84%. Okay. 25 years later of so many COP meetings and negotiations, and the global share of primary fossil fuels has not changed much. We have not made a substantial difference. Yes, larger amounts of low carbon energy sources have come on stream, but that's barely taken care of the natural increases because of population growth and economic growth. And so in essence, the share of fossil fuels within our system has not changed very much. And that's a disheartening fact. So that takes you to a point which says, let's do something about this. And the let's do something about it, I think, is a getting together of both the institutional arrangements and the political will, if you wish, and coupled with significant transformative technological enhancements that would really move us faster on that path.
Let me follow up on that. Tom, those transformative technological innovations, where do you see them? What's the best bet?
First of all, they have invented the box the size of a microwave that you hang on your wall. It's called the Powerwall. That's another innovation from Tesla and Elon Musk in Silicon Valley. The challenge with thinking that we need fundamentally new technologies, not incremental improvements on what we've got, doesn't take into account the deployment cycle, right? This isn't like an app. You're not going to invent Uber and disrupt the taxi industry, in the energy space. You are talking about infrastructure. You're talking about debt finance that has to come from very conservative bankers. You're talking about a reliability and demonstration cycle that takes years, even a decade, before you're even considered reliable enough for the grid. So if we're thinking about a technology that hasn't been invented yet, fundamentally new, it's going to be 15 to 20 years before it's in a position to be deployed at scale. The question is deployment. So by all means, let's seed that innovation cycle and let's have some new technologies 10, 20 years from now because we want to keep our options open. But the heavy lifting is in deployment. The amount of capital required to rebuild energy systems is in the trillions and trillions of dollars. It's in the billions to fund R&D. So let's fund R&D. There's no downside to that. It costs almost nothing. We can all, even the left and right, agree on the R&D side. But it's deployment that's important. And the deep conservatism of bankers and utilities is the thing you want to aim at. So even Canadian technology breakthroughs require targeted public support to ensure those first big commercial deployments are accelerated into the market faster than those bankers would normally do it because we have a problem to solve. And if it wasn't for climate, just let it happen in its natural way. We don't have that kind of time. So those are the kinds of financial and social innovations that I think are more important than closing our eyes and hoping for the magic bullet, because that magic bullet will not be deployed super quickly just because it happens to be cheap and convenient.
Sarah.
I totally agree, and I think it's been, I guess, now 12 years since there was this kind of seminal piece of work out of Princeton that talked about how to stabilize our carbon emissions using existing technologies. And that's actually a remarkably optimistic message, that we have the technologies already available, that not one technology alone will do it, but that we weave them together and ratchet down carbon emissions sort of bit by bit. But the challenge then is scaling up and accelerating their uptake. So then we shift ourselves from focusing on those technologies to deployment, to social movements, to the people that use the technologies and the values that support their use. The definition of what is the good life, of consumption, of what value a car brings us, all of these bigger questions of our values are the ones that we've been ignoring when we focus entirely on the technical side, I think.
All right, so let's look at the other side of the coin. If technology and innovation is one side of it, political change and social change and acceptance of the need to do something, Ortwin, I think, is the other side. How well are we doing at moving that other side?
Well, I think we're still lacking behind there because we have been fixed on the technological side. And I would like to emphasize again that all the energy sources that we're using today, we have been using for decades. So it's not that we will find a totally new energy source out there. And even if you think about fusion, it will still be 50 years before we even think of using it. So in that sense, we have to deal with the technologies that we have now, but we can use them more intelligently. And I think Sarah made that clear point. I mean, if energy services are getting less expensive because we're more efficient, we use more energy. And that is what we call the rebound effect. The rebound effect, let me give you one little example of my home country, Germany. We had an efficiency improvement from 1980 to 2010 by 38% for all the kitchen appliances, everything that we have at our home. So in theory, we should use less energy because all our appliances have become 38% more efficient. But people now use 18% more electricity for the kitchen than they used in 1980.
Why?
Why? Because now they have 2 refrigerators, and the old refrigerator, when we went to all these households, they said, "Where is your refrigerator?" In the basement. So we have, all this, we doubled and tripled our energy appliances, even furthermore than it's absolutely needed for us to have, a comfortable life, because it's so cheap.
Tom, let's do another example here. We all, of course, have run into, during the course of our days, people who deny that climate change is happening. I hear from them all the time. They email me. I'm sure they email you too.
All 8 of them.
All 8 of them.
That's active denial of climate change. What's passive denial? Is that something else?
Yeah, that's a good question. So active denial, I think you can isolate. I mean, there's always going to be people in the 21st century who don't want to sort of endorse the modern scientific view of the world. That's just life in the free world. Passive denial, I think, is more insidious. Passive denial is where if you ask someone if climate change is real, they will say yes. Yes, NASA's smart. They say it's real. I believe it's real. but you go about your everyday life as if it weren't the sort of existential crisis that it is. And I know we don't like catastrophic language because it tends to freeze the frog in the pot. It makes us paralyzed. But I think part of what we do is act as if it weren't the deep problem that it is. If we acted as if it were as bad as it is, there would be, I think, a lot more social unrest asking and demanding for change. I think it's beginning to happen. But one way out of that passive denial is it's kind of an implicit helplessness, right? That you have a job you have to go to, you got kids you got to take to the hockey game. You know, there's things you need to keep doing in your life, and so this is too overwhelming a problem. So one way out of it is you paint this picture of a solution. What does a solution look like? Well, work backwards from 2050. You've got this clean, green economy with abundant sources of energy underwritten by interesting technology, which people tend to like. So this is a very positive view of the future that speaks to the best in us. We're innovative, the future's better than the past, there's economic upside here, Canadian innovation, Canadian jobs. So you paint a picture of the solution and what it means to people, and then people are able to be a little more active. And so the passive part of denying climate, I think, is underwritten by not really understanding what the solution is. And when you paint that picture, I think people endorse it.
We have somebody here from Germany tonight, so we're going to talk about your country and what it's in the midst of right now. Okay, Ortwin, here we go. Germany's energy system, they tell us, may be an example of getting past that passive denial of climate change. And here's a quote from National Geographic that we want to put out for your consideration. Germany is pioneering an epochal transformation it calls the Energiewende, an energy revolution, that scientists say all nations must one day complete if a climate disaster is to be averted. Among large industrial nations, Germany is a leader. Germany, the world's fourth largest economy, has promised some of the most aggressive emissions cuts. By 2020, a 40% cut from 1990 levels, and by 2050, at least 80%. Okay, Arwin, briefly tell us, what's this transition all about?
Well, after the Fukushima accident, there was a governmental commission, and the governmental commission came out with a plan. And the plan was really to reduce the fossil fuel share from 85% to less than 20%, to phase out all nuclear power plants, so that was along with it, and to really have an energy system based on renewable energy and energy efficiency. And well, there is a success story behind it, because actually we have increased the share of renewable energy tremendously. Now in Germany, around 34% of all the electricity is generated by wind or solar. 34%.
34%.
Which is, you know, quite an accomplishment. On the other hand, of course, we still have coal, and coal is actually has even increased a little bit because we have decreased the nuclear share. So yes, if there is a will, and I think the real good thing about the governmental commission was, and I think that may be a role model for other countries, that in that commission we had people from the unions, from different political backgrounds, from various cultural backgrounds, experts, you know, everyone representing the full perspective, the full spectrum of society. And they came to the unanimous vote that this is what we should strive for.
Well, let me ask Jatine, do you think they're on the right track?
They are on the right track, but we must also do a little reality test in terms of the proposition that the German energy system indicates to us. If there is any country that has spent an enormous amount of both capital and installation of renewable energy resources in its energy system, Germany would be a fantastic example. And then we therefore have to ask, so what's the output here, and what does the picture look like in terms of the German carbon footprint with respect to the electricity sector and the actual production from this vast amount, 75,000 odd megawatts of both wind and solar capacity installed in Germany. The output from that particular large installation of capacity barely exceeds that of the remaining 10,000 gigawatts of nuclear capacity in Germany. So what that says is, you cannot just be mesmerized by the idea of the year-by-year increase in installation of capacity. What does that capacity actually deliver in terms of power output is one. And secondly, because of the coal acting as a backstop into the system, the carbon footprint of the German electricity system is not as good as it should or ought or could be.
In which case, Sarah, is this an example that we ought to be following?
Absolutely. I mean, you can't take the entire experience of another country and transplant it to others, but it does teach us a number of things that, as Ortwin said, that public push, that collective voice can really trigger a transition. But in Canada, what we really seem to need is coherence between levels of government. So, various dimensions of the energy picture or the climate picture are governed municipally, others provincially, others federally. And we have many, many cases in which these two levels of government have aims that are completely at odds with each other, and end up, setting us back in terms of progress on reducing greenhouse gas emissions and making the renewable energy transition. So evaluating where jurisdiction lies over various sources of greenhouse gas emissions at each level and bringing those into harmony could really accelerate Canada's individual transition.
Tom, this sounds really bloody expensive. Is it to make this transition?
Absolutely not. I think what's expensive is not doing anything, right? I mean, the inherent costs we will face with the degraded environment far, 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 by orders of magnitude, outweigh the cost of solving this problem. Even taking the critics, by critics I mean the Bjorn Lomborgs and the American Competitiveness Institute, the right-wing sort of neocon think tanks, when they accuse dreamers like us of changing the energy system and us accusing us of wasting money on a very expensive solution to a problem, their accusations are about 1% of GDP, right? That's roughly what this thing will cost. Those are their numbers. I actually think there's a net benefit to solving the problem. You rebuild the energy system and energy is now free because it's all capital cost, not operating cost, jobs, yada, yada. I would argue there's a net benefit, but just taking the opponent's view at face value, 1% of GDP is nothing. If you think about that as insurance on the planet, I think homeowners understand the notion of insurance. You buy insurance on your home. We're buying insurance on our global economy for the cost of 1% of GDP. That doesn't sound like a bad deal to me. And when it's explained in those terms, I think it makes sense.
Well, let's try nickels and dimes here.
Sure.
I think, you're going to correct me if I'm off on this, but I suspect the nuclear power plants that are in the province of Ontario right now can create electricity at what? 5, 6, 7 cents a kilowatt hour, something like that?
It depends on how you measure it. I don't think it's quite as cheap as that. But running nukes, once they're up and running, yeah, they're pretty cheap. But there are a lot of implied costs on insurance and decommissioning and so on. But let's take it at face value.
For argument's
Sure,
sake, 5, 6, 7.
Yeah.
Can the transition to whatever the future holds do it that cheaply?
Here's what the energy incumbents miss. All of us have trouble visualizing exponential growth. Something seems very slow at first, and then it begins to accelerate, and it's a steamroller. That's what's happening to the deployment of things like solar energy. That's what's happening in an inverse way to the cost of things like solar energy and storage. The thing to understand about renewables is they're a technology-based energy source, not a resource-based energy source. The resource is the sun and the wind and so on. But because it's technology that is grabbing the energy, it follows a technology cost curve, which goes down, and a technology adoption curve, which goes up. If you doubled the amount of solar in the world 6 more times, that we can visualize, all of the primary energy that we use in every country around the world could come from solar. Now, there's deployment issues and all that. That is slightly more complicated than that. But the point being, these exponential growth curves that the incumbents just don't see coming. It's like in Arizona, they saw solar as a kind of a hippie thing until about 5 years ago, when again, Elon Musk, great entrepreneur, got Solar City going. There's so much solar going up on so many rooftops, it's a threat to their business model, and they're trying to sue Solar City to stop them. So these exponential growth curves will catch the energy incumbents by surprise, both on volume of deployments and on cost. And that's where my bet is that will make economic sense, hands down, in the years to come.
Okay, we're a little more than halfway done here, so let me do some business with the folks at home. We want to remind everybody that we're here in Waterloo, Ontario tonight at the Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics to take part in the Open Access Energy Summit, and tonight we're looking at the potential for clean energy breakthroughs. It's the third of 3 programs we've done here in Waterloo at the Perimeter, and our guests tonight from left to right on the dais are Tom Rand, Senior Advisor at the Mars Discovery District, Jatin Nathwani at the University of Waterloo, Ortwin Wren, the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies in Germany, and Sarah Birch, also from the University of Waterloo. Germany is a really fascinating example to study right now, so we want to spend a little more time on that because the Chancellor, getting an enormous amount of attention for the Syrian refugee issue, has made another promise that was equally as headline-grabbing a little while ago, and that's what we want to focus on tonight. She's pledged to shut down all of Germany's nuclear reactors by the year 2022. That is something that I suspect we would have a great deal of difficulty doing here in the province of Ontario or other places. Let's put this graphic up and we'll show you why. Because at the moment, look at that pie chart. We depend on nukes for 60% of our electricity generation in the province right now. Hydroelectric generation for almost a quarter. Gas and oil for about 10%. We're only getting 6% from wind. We're getting less than 1% from solar. And biofuels, again, less than 1%. Something, of course, missing from that map that had been there in years past is coal. We have phased out all the coal-fired generating stations in the province of Ontario, so that's not part of the mix anymore. But it does raise some big questions about, Sarah, to you first, what percentage of our future electricity mix ought to come, in your view, from nuclear?
Well, this is an issue that really divides the climate change community. We certainly have two camps, one of which says we absolutely need to rely on nuclear as a lower carbon solution, and it's already at scale in many cases, and it can already immediately supply, as you see, the vast majority of our energy needs. On the other side of the camp, of course, saying we can do better. There are too many risks associated with this technology, with decommissioning, et cetera, to invest further in the potential for nuclear. So my perspective is that we can do better, that by distributing generation, that by empowering citizens to produce their own energy through micro wind turbines, through solar panels on their roofs, through all kinds of different technologies, we have a more resilient distributed energy system that isn't so susceptible to climate change impacts like extreme events, and that also removes some of these costs associated with the running of the nuclear facilities as well.
And we'd put OPG out of business and they'd never be able to pay off their debt. Right?
Absolutely. There are costs associated with a transition, but as Tom mentioned, the problem with just reducing this to cents per kilowatt hour kind of calculus is that that doesn't incorporate all of the true costs of using that fuel source for energy. And if we were to do that, we would get a much deeper picture of what the impacts are on future generations and on climate change of all of these sources.
Jatine, we're at 60 in the province of Ontario, 60% nuclear. In France, it's even higher. Can you imagine the province, can you imagine France just sort of weaning itself off nuclear power as we make this transition?
Steve, you're pushing me into between the devil and the deep blue sea proposition. But let me.
That's what I do, sir. That's what I do.
Let me try.
That's my brand.
I think, and some folks may disagree with me, but I think there's a certain degree of intellectual honesty required here to accept one simple fact: nuclear is a non-carbon source of energy, and to that extent, climate change, which is a really truly pressing problem, we talked about the urgency, the need, the desire to really move the energy system into something other than fossil-based system as it is. Then you have to ask what might be the credible solutions. So nuclear is a dense form of energy. It provides vast amounts of very credible, reasonably low price, one can have a debate about that, source of energy, and it's non-carbon, and so it would be rather unfortunate if we just simply get ourselves locked into the idea that it is something we cannot deal with. And different countries and globally will come to different conclusions. So a nuclear solution in the German situation does not work because the political system there just has made that decision. But there are other countries that are actually pushing ahead with nuclear because they see that as part of the solution. So I think at the global scale we have to take the view that this particular solution, to the extent that it's a partial solution to our energy needs, may have a role.
Tom, if you don't like 60%, what's a better number for you?
You know what, I actually don't think, I would call this energy tribalism, where people pick their favorite technology and defend it. There's a great episode early on in the West Wing where the different energy lobbyists come into the White House and they each denigrate their opponents. The solar guys beat up wind, wind beats up geothermal, and so on. And at the end of this little session, the White House aide says, who needs a fossil fuel lobbyist when they can do this to themselves? So I think, look, there's an outcome we want. And the outcome, everybody can agree on, aside from a few weird skeptics, that we want lower carbon emissions. That's it. And we need to put that signal into the marketplace, cover all the true costs of the various different energy sources, and let the creativity of the market solve that problem. Maybe it's nuclear, maybe it's renewables plus storage, maybe it's enhanced geothermal, I don't know. And that's the great thing about the market, is that it's highly creative and it has room for new innovations and so on. But you need to put the economic signals in place where the outcome is what you aim for, and then everyone can place their bets on their favorite horses, but we don't need to decide in advance which one's the winner.
Well, Angela Merkel has made a decision, and she says nuclear is the loser. Is that the right decision?
Well, I mean, I think the first priority should be decarbonization. I agree with that. But I think there are two aspects with nuclear that we need to consider. Number one is, yes, there is nuclear and it works fairly well, at least in those countries that have advanced nuclear power reactors. However, if you want to build a new reactor in any of these countries, you're going to be facing a lot of trouble. Even in France, people tell me, well, we may renew the ones that are there, but if you want to build a new one, forget it. We'll have so much public opposition and it will not work. Secondly, the new reactors have become so expensive in terms of investment. The new Finnish reactor now has tripled in cost. And if you think now the UK is thinking for new reactors, that they were looking for contractors. They found a Chinese contractor. And then he says he wants to have double as much per each kilowatt electricity as the British are paying today. So the issue that nuclear is inexpensive has probably vanished. And it's, in the past that was true, and for the ones that are still there. So the issue of phasing out nuclear slowly make a lot of sense economically as well as politically.
Do you think Germany can get rid of their nukes by 2022? That's not much time.
Yeah, that's not a big problem. The issue is we had 33% nuclear, now we have 33% renewable. Now we can't compare them, there are fluctuation and everything else, so we do have a little bit fossil more than we had before. But I think phasing out nuclear, if it's not 78 or 80%, even do that, then you just need more time. Switzerland is going to phase out, Japan is thinking of phasing out, it goes back and forth. Well, around 16 of the 28 European countries say they will phase out nuclear energy.
Well,
So
let's look at Canada. Let's look at Canada and our potential energy future here. We've got, again, some numbers that we want to share. The STANFORD Solutions Project has evaluated wind and water and solar and the potential for all 50 U.S. states and 139 countries around the world. And they believe that 80% of all energy will be renewable, 80% by the year 2030. And their goal is eventually 100% renewable. And here's what they say about Canada. Here's how they say we can get there. We could go 58% wind, 22% solar. These are obviously much higher numbers than what we've got today. 16% hydro, which is a little less than what we've got. 2% wave/tidal. 2% geothermal. And of course, very conspicuous by its absence on that pie chart is nuclear. Now, let's get a response from the Canadian Electricity Association, because this is the current breakdown. This is for the whole country, not just the province of Ontario. We're on to pie chart 4 now, Sheldon. Hydro at more than 60%, fossil fuels at almost 20%, nukes hanging in there at almost 16%, wind just down less than 2%, solar and tidal even less than 1%. All right, as we look at the future, Sarah, is that pie chart possible, the first one?
Okay, well, the problem is that the two pie charts actually show very different things. So the STANFORD Solutions Project talks about a Canada in 2050 where everything has been electrified. So that's actually, that chart shows our end energy use of all kinds, not just electricity, whereas the second one shows electricity. So
Bit of apples and oranges then?
Sorry?
A bit of apples and oranges?
Absolutely, those two can't at all be compared because in fact, electricity production alone, if we're just taking that, not fuel for cars and not natural gas combustion for heat, just electricity, we use hydro for about 17 or 16% of that. So yes, I think the first one, the STANFORD Solutions Project, while they make a whole bunch of interesting assumptions that I don't think are necessarily entirely realistic, Canada is a renewable energy superpower as well. We tend to really closely identify with this fossil fuel-based resource-oriented energy market. So there are incredibly powerful parts of this country in terms of wind production and solar throughout the prairies. So the renewable energy potential in this country is pretty vibrant and I think gives us a lot of cause for hope.
Tom, that first pie chart, is that something we should be aiming at?
Yeah, why not? I think what I like about the Stanford study is it really sets a high bar. It says if you want to do this, if you want to know it's possible, it is. And it's fairly simple spreadsheet, but it is based on engineering practicalities. The study's author was a pretty smart guy.
Can I just go back at you on this one more time?
Yeah.
This Stanford Solutions project says we in Canada
Sure.
could get 60% of our power
Sure.
from wind.
Sure, it's a physical possibility. So I'm not saying that's where we're going to end up. The reason I like that study is it sets a possible endpoint. You don't have to end up there, but it's saying you end up anywhere between here and halfway there, you've done a pretty good job. It's stating the possibility of producing energy at massive quantities from renewable sources, which is really what the sort of energy establishment and financial establishment in this country really needs to hear. We've gotten so used to treating renewable energy like it was the kids' table at the dinner party, right? A lot of sound and fury, and but not serious. And I think that time is over. I think we can get far more energy from the sun and the wind and so on than we'll ever get from melting tar, than we'll ever get from burning oil. And this study makes that case. Now, where we end up and how far we want to go down that road, there's lots of optionality in there. But it sets the possibility that we can do it from an engineering perspective and a financial perspective. Now it's an issue of policy and social engagement to say, how far do we want to go? Now we can pick and choose.
I got to tell you, the kids' table at the wedding, the hockey analogy, the frog in the pot, you are the champion of the analogies on this program tonight. There's no question about it. Jatine, that first pie chart again. I want to go there again because, again, we're talking 60% wind, no nuclear. Is that something we should even strive for?
Thank you for bringing this out, and Tom, don't swing your arm at me because I have a very, very fundamental problem with that Stanford study. I think it falls. It's sadly PR, mostly PR, of very high quality though, and a very judicious mixture of what you might call a sense, half sense, and nonsense. And there is quite a number of very detailed, thorough critiques of that Stanford study done by their colleagues just up the road at Berkeley, and on one could go. But what it really fails on is this connectedness to the reality of the grid, how it works, how you can actually get to it, and so on. Having said that, I still share the view with Tom that, yes, we do need to get into some sort of a visionary perspective that gets you to a very large non-carbon source of energy, and if that happens to be part of it, nuclear and part renewables, then that kind of will work.
Gotcha. I want to get a little wisdom from the audience here, and to do that, I'm going to introduce you to Chiedza Mazaiwana. You are here for this conference. First of all, tell us where you're from.
I'm from Zimbabwe.
You're from Zimbabwe, and you are the Power for All campaign manager at Practical Action in Zimbabwe.
That's
Which
right.
means what? What do you do?
Well, I lead the Power for All campaign, which is a campaign that promotes distributed renewable energy as the solution to achieving universal energy access.
Do you think Zimbabwe needs a kind of energy miracle, the way we've been talking about it on this program tonight?
Certainly. And for Zimbabwe, that miracle means my grandmother has access to clean energy for cooking, which is affordable, and she's not exposed to those dangerous fumes and smoke that come from dirty fuels.
Where does your grandmother live?
She lives in the rural part of Zimbabwe called Hurungwe.
And how does she cook now? With what? What kind of energy?
Well, she uses firewood.
Firewood?
Yes.
Which she herself has to collect, I guess.
Yes, she has to collect it on her own.
So that takes a long time.
It takes a long time, and it takes a long time, it takes a lot of energy for someone who's old. And that miracle again means that my aunt is able to go and deliver at the clinic in a well-lit environment, and it means that that baby that she delivers does not skip his or her vaccination schedule because there's vaccines available at that clinic, powered by a refrigerator. And it also means that my cousin does not have to spend half the day collecting firewood or fetching water to either water the field or for domestic use.
So an energy breakthrough would be a big deal for everybody's life in Zimbabwe.
Definitely.
And tell me, how's it going to happen?
Well, I think we need to have a mix of everything in the energy mix. We need grid extension, we need distributed renewable energy systems, renewable off-grid systems, to reach out to the isolated communities. So in Zimbabwe, the majority of communities that live without access live far away from the grid. And it means extending the grid to them is quite expensive, and it takes a heck of a long time. So to do that faster, we need to deploy decentralized renewable energy systems so that they have access.
Chiedza, I have to tell you that every time I read about Zimbabwe in the newspapers over here, it's always bad news. And I wonder whether or not things are stable enough there, whether there is the political will, the ability there for these things to happen. What do you think?
Well, I think as we speak, the political will is there. But what we really need to do is redefine the policy and regulatory environment so that we're able to attract investment and we're able to, to have the promotion of the uptake of decentralized renewables.
Gotcha.
So just as you said, just recently sometime last year, we were experiencing from about 16 to 18 hours of blackouts, not brownouts.
Blackouts, nothing.
Very dark blackouts. And so that's why I am saying it is important that we look at the different options that exist in the energy mix. And the solution for the isolated communities is certainly distributed renewables.
Chiedza, we're very grateful that you joined us today and shared your views with us. How about a hand for her? Thank you very much. Okay, in our remaining moments here, let's talk about the developing world. We want to talk about India, we want to talk about China, and so on. They do want and will want cheap, efficient, reliable sources of power to power the developments in their countries. And I guess the big question here is, how are we going to respect those needs of these countries to bring themselves into the 21st century, while at the same time making sure that they don't contribute to the climate change that I know you are all deathly afraid of? Sarah, how do we find that balance?
So interestingly, just last week I was sitting next to a woman from Beijing, and we were doing a visioning process about what the world might look like in a deeply sustainable 2050, and trying to make it very visceral and very personal. And she said, my world in 2050, I look out my window and I see blue sky, because she doesn't see blue sky in Beijing right now. So there is an incredible array of reasons why a transition towards renewable energies in countries like especially China and India should deliver on both the right to develop, should improve quality of life, improve opportunities for education, for employment, et cetera, but also improve those other dimensions of sustainability that are so crucial, like public health. And so this is why we hope that both less developed countries and more developed countries come together in the context of, for instance, the Paris Agreement, which our Prime Minister just signed a couple of days ago, to distribute responsibility for responding to climate change, but as a community share the technologies that would allow countries to improve development conditions, but leapfrog over this nasty business of the last 100 years or so of dirty fossil fuel combustion.
Ortwin, how are we going to do this? Allow these countries to develop while at the same time having them be part of the climate change solution?
Well, I think what is important is to show the trade-offs that you have to take into account. I mean, if you think about China, and I can just confirm that I was on a Chinese committee on air quality last year, and the calculations were around 22 million people die every year from air pollution in China alone, 22 million. So if you put that number on the table and you say, do you want to have more coal, which may be a little bit less expensive, or do you want something cleaner, which is a little bit more expensive, what would you choose? And the second point I would like to make is the issue of equity. I think equitable access is very important. So it should be something like a human right to have at least a basic supply of energy, because that makes the whole world and the whole populations, everything much better.
Jatine, if this is going to happen, are the richer countries going to have to pick your word, subsidize, help pay for, whatever, the less developed countries in their efforts to get more renewables in place?
If only we could get away from that logic and get to the point where here is an incredible opportunity. This large proportion of humanity that does not have energy access today, and we need to transition and develop technologies that will get us there. You are not faced with a legacy infrastructure for those people who don't have the infrastructure. So now the development of renewables-based energy technologies that are distributed, that begin to get at the question of these fundamental needs, and that's what the summit here has been to get at it. We have an initiative called Affordable Energy for Humanity, which is really part of this thinking to see how can scientific and technological innovations literally do the leapfrogging that will allow access at an affordable cost that is clean.
Tom.
Yeah, I would second it. I actually think the most productive role that Canada could play in solving that problem. Like, no one wants to deny the developing world access to cheap energy. I mean, that's basic humanity. They can join the modern world. The best thing I think Canada can do to help that happen is to continue to deliver innovative solutions. We are an innovative-driven society. We have lots of engineers and entrepreneurs. We have in Canada a company developing the world's lowest cost solar power. It's Morgan Solar, 4 to 5 cents per kilowatt hour in sunny areas. We have energy storage solutions that are coming out of Canada. So, you want to talk about delivering a miracle, like continuing to improve upon these kinds of technologies, which we do really well here through our universities, our entrepreneurial systems, our venture funds. That's probably the best thing we could do.
I know you're on a roll, but I read in the paper this past week, SunEdison in the United States went under. That's hundreds of millions of dollars down the drain.
Well, I mean, all industries, as they mature, have casualties as newcomers come on the scene, as financial models evolve. So that's normal. SunEdison going under actually opens up a very large window for the new solar startups to jump through. So I'm not worried about SunEd. They made decisions about how to build their company, and they made some mistakes. That has nothing to do with whether or not the price of solar is going to continue to come down, because it will.
Okay, that's Tom on solar. We got about 2 minutes left. Let me get just a few seconds from each of you as you go along here. Jatine, to you first. Divine, I know we're all suspicious of the magic bullet here and the big idea, but divine for us, if you will. What is it?
Let me build on the point that Tom just made, and I think it's essential. Today, the poorest people in the world are paying actually very high prices for electricity access. So, if you think in terms of kerosene lamps and the amount of light delivered through a kerosene, that's 35 times more than the 10 cents a kilowatt hour that we produce. So, in fact, the cleaner energy technologies are already available to meet a proportion of that need for those who need it at a cost of competitive advantage.
Ortwin, bitte.
Well, I think what is most important is to have a close cooperation between governments, NGOs, experts, scientists, and corporate groups. If they cooperate, I think we'll make a real step forward, and it will also help to have affordable and clean energy at the same time.
Sarah, why don't you take the last minute?
I think it's really important to think about what our sustainable communities actually look like, and to try to deliver on multiple goals simultaneously, both greenhouse gas reduction, renewable energy transitions, adaptation to climate change, responding to the impacts of climate change, as well as equity and access and education and health. So all of these are crucial dimensions of transitioning towards sustainable communities. So, and I think without those visions, and without bringing on new sets of actors that we often ignore, like small businesses, for instance, we won't accelerate the transformation towards sustainable communities effectively.
Terrific. And so ends our third program, our third of 3 here at the Perimeter Institute. Get comfortable. I want to take just a couple of minutes here because we got to do some thank yous. First of all, that is the agenda for Wednesday, April 27th, 2016. We should tell you that if you want to check out any of our 3 programs from the Waterloo Global Science Initiative's Open Access Energy Summit, as well as find additional summit content, there are lectures there, there are articles there. It's all worth your time. Please visit this special website we've set up for this, tvo.org/WGSI. Now, here come the thank yous. We want to thank the Perimeter Institute. We've had a great partnership with them for the last many years. We come here every year, and it's great. They make us feel so welcome and hospitable, and it's just a wonderful thing. The Waterloo Global Science Initiative for inviting us to come back. I guess the partnership's working well, because we're back again. Very good. I want to thank Mark Ford and his terrific crew, which has transformed this space into what really is a fantastic television studio. Lights, camera, action. It's all here. I want to thank our editorial production team, led by our executive producer Stacey Dunseith and Hillary Clark, her 2IC, and Eric Bombacino, who produced all 3 of these programs and did a great job. Well done, Eric. And also, I want to thank our 3 different audiences who have come out from near and far to join us this evening. And Greg, I want you to get one guy in particular on camera here, okay? I always say, watch this program and you're going to get a lot smarter. And here's a 10-year-old who is in the front row. How great is that? And the beautiful thing about this is what's great about this. His folks didn't drag him out here. He wanted to come. And why did he want to come? Because he wanted to be on TV, of course. Here you go. Give me props there, buddy. Way to go. Okay, good stuff. We did that. And I bet you he learned a whole lot in the process as well.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit supporttvo.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.